Up next, we have Jinteki. Vantage Point is releasing some very strange new Jinteki cards, which are going to be very interesting to kind of figure out. I do feel like Jinteki cards are always a bit of a puzzle to be solved. So, yeah, it's going to be, again, somewhat of a mixed bag, but I think the average power level of Jinteki cards is really high. So, this one out. First up, the Identity Melies U, only the brightest. When your discard phase, actually, the text on this is so complicated that I'm not even going to read it out. I'm just going to tell you what it does, and you just have to believe me, because I think this is like the most complicated card to pass its functionality that NSG has ever done. It's an intensely strange effect, very cool design. So what it does is, after your turn, after every one of your turns, you pick basically HQ, R&D, or archives. Then, the first time the runner makes a successful run on any central, you reveal what you picked. If you got it correct, you get to trash a card from the top of R&D, and then add any, or you look at the top card of R&D, decide whether you want to trash it, and if you do, you can take your pick of any card in archives, including that one you just trashed, and add it to your hand as like an incredible recursion effect. If you get it wrong, it just flops and doesn't do anything. And if the runner doesn't run at all, and this is a very critical part of this, if the runner doesn't run any of your centrals, you just get a credit at the start of your turn, and you can still change it at the end. So I'm going to show you the other arts. So if you can set it to archives, R&D, or HQ, and the color of the card art tells you which server it's going to be, along with these icons at the top. And funnily enough, I haven't seen anyone mention this, but the colors correlate with the runner faction that actually like owns that server. Traditionally, criminals cared about HQ, shapers cared about R&D, and anarchs cared about archives. And you can see that we have blue, green, and red to symbolize those spots, which is kind of neat. How good is this? This is insane. This is the best identity for any type of glacier deck, hands down. The only reason why this is not the single best Jinteki identity is that Alco is absolutely bonkers and will continue to be completely bonkers. But like, if you're doing anything slower than what Alco does, you will be doing it out of Melies U. RH was a half decent deck in the last meta. It was pretty good. It is gone. I will never expect to see it again because this card mogs it so severely. Combo decks love this because you get recursion. It's hard to describe just how useful this ability is and how often you will be triggering it. I think I'll link a video by NotYeti, TMKF, Netrunner, who describes exactly how the math on this works. But basically, you're not just guessing where the runner is going, you're looking at the board state, looking at what they're capable of getting into and saying, oh, this is where you are going. Like, you don't really have a choice. If I've double iced HQ with like 2 Botos and you don't have a factor, you aren't going to run HQ. Like, you just aren't going to get in there. If I've poisoned archives or iced archives, you're not going there either. You're going to run through the whatever I put on R&D, and that's where I will put my trigger. And like, even if the runner knows that, it doesn't matter. They still have to run centrals to win the game, or they can not. And I think a lot of the time runners will not run your centrals because it's too risky. It's so likely that you'll get your absurdly powerful, okay, I trash some shit off the top. I trash a petty cash off the top. I add a hedge fund to hand. Like, that's too powerful to let happen very often. So you just get your credit every turn, and you just have to sit pretty with your credit every turn and a natural like centrals defense. Completely absurd how strong that is to have your identity simultaneously protect your weakest central and also give you a creditor turn pretty much. The recursion's just nuts. I will say that like, I don't think Glacier Jinteki is like that strong. I was not as much of a believer in Glacier Jinteki as for example, soccer and the likes were going into Worlds where they actually brought RH. And I don't really think it gets many new amazing tools, except for the fact that the ID has gone from sometimes a credit a turn and a small deck size to bigger deck size, but insane ID text. So I do think that this is a 5-star card. I think there will be some kind of slower Jinteki list that absolutely loves this. It could even be you run this out of a fast list as well, and run like assets and just say that like this just protects my centrals and that is so good. But I think that if you're doing that, you probably still want Alco. Alco doesn't get worse because of this. This is just going to fill the gap that is everything except for Alco. So really interesting card, really powerful text. Never sleep on this. Use this. Lotus Haze is another, I said it like these are all kind of puzzles as to what you're supposed to be doing with them. A 4/2 agenda, security. When you score the agenda, you place 3 counters on it, and you can spend those counters to move upgrades to the root of other servers. What a bizarre effect. You can even move locations with this, like grids, I guess. You could move your defensive upgrades where they need to be. If the runner like runs a server that doesn't have your important thing, like an agenda in it, you can like yoink them all out of the way somewhere else. The utility is quite flexible and also quite complicated. I don't know that there's like an obvious deck that this, like there's no existing deck that you just slots in Lotus Haze and says, oh, this is just way better than Proprio Negation. Or like, oh, this is just much better than Seamless Launch. Or, you're not running this in Alco and saying that this is better than the agendas that you're running in there. So it has to be a new style of deck that likes its upgrades so much that repositioning them 3 times is worth not just playing Proprio Negation, or if you're playing Proprio Negation, not playing something else. That's a little confusing. I think it's pretty easy to score this out because I assume that this deck is also running Lacosta grids. But then if you're running Lacosta grids, you're probably not moving Lacosta grids. So I think that the board states that this asks you to have is a bit too situational. Maybe you're pushing your deck too far into a weird direction to make this work. I think it's going to see experimentation. I think it's a 2-star card because I think Melies U kind of is going to allow a lot of experimentation with weird decks because it's so strong. And I think this will be an idea that's experimented with enough to justify 2 stars, but I don't think it's going to be the future of Glacier. I don't think it's going to be like a trap deck where you just shove 3 ganks on whatever server they run and say, okay, now you have to do that. It doesn't really pass to me as a top tier strategy, but it's an odd one, so keep an eye on it. Esker is a little ambush. It costs 0 to res, although you don't really have to res it. Because it's for centrals. It says while the runner is accessing this asset in R&D, they must reveal it. And when they access that this card, they lose a credit. And if they're tagged, it does a net damage, but that's really not going to happen very often. So Esker is mostly just when you touch it, they lose a credit. The most important text on Esker is that it does not turn off in archives. So this is a pretty premium option to say the runner that wanted to run archives every couple of turns, maybe we're looking at S's who are running Nurse Han and getting crazy card draw while checking all your face downs. Maybe you're trashing cards in Alco or Melies U off R&D, and you just want like a little bit of natural disincentive for the runner to want to run there. That's pretty good. People say you can run this in GameNet. GameNet is still going to be terrible. Don't worry about it. Yeah, the fact that it's persistent is like there's no real way to turn off this text is pretty good. I think I could imagine a world where the runner just has to lose 3, 4, 5 credits to this over the course of a game. But I don't think the rate on that is that good. The only saving grace to me is that this is 1 influence, so it's very splashable. Like I don't actually think Alco wants this. Alco really likes threats. They want every card they draw to be like a powerful threat. And I don't think this is a powerful threat. I think you could run a number of them in Melies, perhaps. I think you run a number of them in maybe some other decks as like a one influence. I kind of want to beef my archives a little bit because cards end up in there. So I'm going to give it 3 stars. It's really not too impressive to me, but I'm sure that some B-tier decks will say that like, oh, this is pretty good, and maybe it even makes it into like the best Melies lists, but I'm not so sure if that's going to be the case. ezaM is a strange little ice. It's a code gate. It costs 1 and it has 3 strength. So okay, the stats are insane. It's got 2 subroutines as well. Holy. So it's got like drafter level stats of like 3 strength, 2 subs, but it costs only 1. That's crazy. It says, look at the top card of R&D. You may add that card to the bottom of R&D. Okay, that subroutine is pretty ass. Very often not going to do anything. You can bottom a 3-pointer sometimes, but that doesn't really do that much. Like that, you're going to shuffle your deck eventually anyway, and putting like the chance of putting a 3-pointer to the bottom is like not crazy high. And then it says each piece of ice gets +1 strength for the remainder of the run. I think that is a very marginal effect. I don't think it's going to matter very much. So obviously the cost to res, like the cost to strength ratio is crazy. It's also got some text at the top that says you can click to swap it with another installed piece of ice. And if you're playing the corp against me, I strongly encourage you to use that very often because I want you to waste your clicks doing nothing. That is not text that you should basically ever be using. It doesn't increase the power level of this card almost at all. It's just like flavor. So I don't believe in this card. I think the subs basically don't matter and you can let them fire for the most part and without stressing about it. I think that it does not protect asset decks at all, so you don't want it in there. It does not fit into Glacier slots-wise or mechanically. I think it does still get broken for 1 by Buzzsaw, and Buzzsaw's pretty good. So yeah, I just don't believe in this one. This is 1 star. I just doesn't do enough, doesn't justify the slot, and it being like stats efficient doesn't really matter if the stats don't do anything. Knowledge Seeker is a better code gate. We're getting some good code gates in total in Vantage Point, which is good because our code gates up to this point have been horrendous. I've been playing Fly Swatter and everything. But now we have Knowledge Seeker, which says 5 cost, 5 strength. That's pretty good, by the way. 5 strength is a lot of strength. Place 1 virus, so the 3 subroutines, there's a lot of subroutines, but one of them's fake. It says, place a virus counter on this ice, look at the top 4 cards of R&D and arrange them in any order and end the run. The first sub is weird, never seen that before. Well, it's because it has some top text. Whenever an encounter with this ice ends, if it has 3 or more hosted virus counters, purge virus counters and de-res the ice. Is purging virus counters worth 5 credits to re-res Knowledge Seeker? Not usually, very situationally it is, but unfortunately the runner has complete control over whether or not that's going to happen. So yeah, I don't, this basically has, it's a 5 cost, 5 res, 5 strength with 2 functional subroutines and a fairly substantial downside in that if the runner runs through it 3 times, they can make you pay 5 more to re-res it if they're happy to tank the virus purge, which again they're completely in control with. Also, the second sub is only okay. Like it's good, and you shouldn't let it fire very often, but like it's not a real face check. This is not like Messner Chestfur, which is kind of what it's competing with in terms of like it's a 5 res code gate. In that like I really don't want to touch it on turn 1. This I can touch on turn 1, I don't care. In fact, you know, I could, if I run it on turn 1, I could run it again and put another virus counter on it. And then again, and then they have to de-res it. And it's like, oh, I haven't really gotten much out of this ice. I think you consider it in Melies U because you just don't have very many good code gate options except for Vampire and NASA. And the more I think about it, the less convinced I am that this is actually better than Vampire and NASA. So I'm going to give it like a 2-star. I think this is worth experimenting with. Maybe it ends the run, which is really, really nice, but I think it's going to be a little bit more awkward than it looks. Lionsmane is a new sentry for Jinteki. Now, we might already be familiar with a couple of pretty good Jinteki sentries. They've got Anemone for like small, like lower to the ground decks that want to deal as much uninteractive damage as you can for Alco, for instance. We've got Sicentan as like the scariest face check in the game, but with very little long-term resilience, so it doesn't actually suit itself well for Glacier, and it can be a bit too expensive for asset decks like Alco. And then we've got Empiricist, which has positioned itself originally as like the new Anansi, in that it was like a big screw you sentry that you just hated to face check. But actually Empiricist is not nearly as scary as Anansi was, despite costing almost as much. So Lionsmane is like a middle ground between Sice and Tan, being like a brutal face check, and Empiricist and being like a very long-term taxing thing to have to break and run through. It's 6 cost, 4 strength. 4 strength is good. Pretty awkward to get there with a lot of the good sentries at killers at the moment. 3 subroutines is also a lot. So if I compare this to either Sice and Tan, it's 2 more strength than Sice and Tan, same number of sentries. But that often means that it gets broken for like 5 with Carmen rather than 3 with Carmen. And if I compare it to Empiricist, I would say it's cheaper than Empiricist and usually will break for about the same amount of credits. So I think it is better than both of those sentries for anything slower than Alco, which means Melies U. I think it is a perfectly decent sentry. I don't think Melies U necessarily wants like anemone style things. I do think they want some long-term resilience. So I think this works. I think this is a 4-star card. It's not blowing my mind. It's not the new Anansi, but I think it is cost efficient. The subroutines, I didn't read the subroutines, do 2 net damage unless the runner pays 3, which they usually will against Jinteki, and then do 2 net damage unless the runner jacks out, which they also usually will. So yeah, I think this works. I think this works well. I think this will usually end the run. The 3 credit loss is big. The 2 net damage is big. Yeah, nice card, actually. Nice card. We have Vicsek, a trap. Don't see many traps. It's 2 cost, 3 strength. Strength doesn't always matter on traps because they can only be broken by AI, which they might just not be running. It's got 2 subs. Weird subs. Do X net damage and give the runner X tags. X is equal to the number of tags they already have. And then after that, so that is in normal cases going to be like 0. X is going to be 0 because runner usually isn't tagged. And then it gives the runner a tag, and then it trashes itself like most traps do. And it's got some fun flavor text. It says bzzz. It's a pretty weird one, right? Because it's like, if they're floating 4 tags, this just like kills them and then buries them in even more tags. If they're not tagged, it's like ping, but worse. By quite a margin worse. So really, you need to expect the top subroutine to fire in order to consider running this. I mean, it's true, like in Jinteki, which sometimes does want to tag and kill, this is a way to give the runner a tag while they run, like somewhat uninteractively. But I'm not sure if you really run that. Like, you don't have to spend influence on ping if you're doing this, which is nice. You can spend your influence on oppos and end of the lines. But I don't know if this makes the cut for like tag Alco actually. It's nice in that like after you play Oppo, if you have one of these on your centrals, you can res it like after the big Oppo turn if they're doing Hail Mary. And because sometimes the right counterplay to Alco is not to clear all the tags, it's to say, oh my god, if I can't clear all these tags, I'm just gonna slam centrals and try and win right now. And Vicsek basically turns that option off because it means that if they try and float all 4 of the big Oppo tags, they just die. They just get exploded. But That may be too narrow of a use case to run Vicsek. I think it's definitely worth experimenting with, so I can tell you this is not a 1-star card. But I don't believe that it's consistent enough or that it like does enough for the card slot to be especially appealing in Alco, and I don't think you want it outside of Alco. Maybe like I just don't think you can spend 3 influence on a trap for other tag-based decks, especially such a situational trap that may simply never be good. It's just not where you can put your influence. So yeah, I'm going to give this one a 2 stars, and that I do think it's going to have some worthy experimentation in tag Alco. The 2-star rating is that I'm guessing it doesn't make the slot. If it does make a slot in tag Alco, which will continue to be an excellent deck, obviously this could be a 4 or 5-star card, but I'm going to have hope for humanity and say this doesn't make the slot. It doesn't quite have the consistency, so it'll stop seeing experimentation later on in the meta. Cultivate. Operation, 0 cost. Look at the top 5 cards of R&D. Trash one, add 1 to HQ, and then the remaining 3 you can put them in any order and then put them back on top of the deck. This one is to me quite bizarre. Like these abilities we see on it are all ones we've seen before, but to just put it on a operation, for some reason in my mind this is super hard to evaluate. I truly don't know if this does anything in terms of like how powerful is this. I don't really know. Certainly it'll never feel terrible to play because it replaces itself. It gives you lots of knowledge, and sometimes trashing that card is actually a good thing situationally. Like if one of those top 5s is petty cash, this is not bad at all. It protects your R&D for a turn if that's useful to you. It finds your combo pieces, so like if you need end of the line, cultivating can actually find that for you. Looking at 5 cards is a lot, but also just drawing cards kind of does the same thing. It's super weird. It's such a simple text, but to me it just kind of scrambles my brain. So somehow this is the biggest question mark to me of the set, of the Jinteki set. But I'm going to go out and say that this is actually a 4-star card because I think you want it in Melies U, which I think is good. But I don't think you've owned like 3 copies. You've owned like 1 or 2 cultivates at most. So that's a perfect descriptor of a 4-star card. But yeah, maybe you just don't. Maybe this card just doesn't do anything and is just a joke and you don't run it at all. But I think the flexibility is there. Super unsure. Unleash. Unleash is a 0 cost Jinteki operation, only 2 influence, and it says as an additional cost to play this, you remove a tag. Okay, so already that's pretty sus text because it needs to be a bit of an end of the line now. Res 1 installed piece of ice, ignoring all costs. You may resolve 1 subroutine on that ice. Wow, that is some really unique text. I think this is like basically the only way to resolve a subroutine outside of a normal situation in standard. It's crazy. The crazy hits with this are Cloud Eater has a sub on it that destroys a card, or another sub that does 3 net damage, and another sub that gives 2 tags. So any Cloud Eater sub you can hit with this is going to be very useful. Plus Cloud Eater costs 10, so you're saving a lot of credits there. There's a tier sub that does 2 core damage, which in decks that like are desperately trying to find ways to uninteractively do core damage to you, this is actually a pretty efficient way to turn a tag into core damage. Hypoxia also kind of does, but it's I'm never convinced by like distributed hypoxia. Distributed unleash into res a tier and to deal 2 core damage and res a free tier, however, like that's maybe worth thinking about. To me, this is perfectly a 3-star card, in that it is going to be defining in decks that are like unleashed decks, but those decks aren't going to be especially good. This is going to be a great card in what I think will be pretty bad decks. Now, there's maybe some like super competitive versions of this that like, yeah, I mean, it's not really worth thinking about too much because I don't truly believe it, but maybe you run this in decks that are already running a lot of tags, and this is like a tag payoff, which is both economy and maybe you trigger a tag subroutine and you give them like 2 tags with something. But I don't think you want that. Tag payoff cards are tricky because like you need to balance your deck so carefully around A, winning the game, B, giving the tags, 3, paying off when you land the tags, and spending influence and your card slots on Unleash may not be the best way to do that unless you have a specific sub in mind, which is like, oh, this changes the game, and Tier is that, Cloud Eater might be that. I don't really see these decks being excellent, but watch out, because someone's going to unleash on me, and it's going to be very upsetting. Red RRoom has my pick for the best art of the set. I really like this one. It's an upgrade. It's 1 to res, 3 to trash. Decent stats. And got some crazy text on here. We've got central server only. The first time each turn an agenda is scored or stolen, place a power counter on this upgrade. And then you can spend those power counters to end the run. But not on, on the Red RRoom server, on any other server. So, wow. That's crazy. If you can, like, a counter that just says end the run is insane. And we know that because there used to be an agenda that when you scored it, a 4-2 agenda, and when you scored it, you got an end the run counter. And that was considered to be like a top tier optimal strategy to pursue. We currently have that in a form with Papaya Negation. And this is a way to like stack, you score your Papaya Negation. And if you've got a Red RRoom on HQ when you do that, then they try and run the Red RRoom, you Papaya Negate them. They try and run your remote server, you Red RRoom them. And then you can chain your agenda scores out of that remote that presumably has a Lacosta there as well. Maybe this is the upgrade that you're supposed to be like moving around with the Lotus Haze so that they can't find your Red RRoom, and that would be a pretty good use case for it, to be honest. No, I don't think that's as good as Papaya Negating, but I think it's it's pretty scary, man. Like this, once this is online, the game is so locked down that I can't rate this below like 2 stars because the effect is so like warping. It kind of even beats Pinhole Threading crazily. But also it does require agendas to be scored or stolen, which means you probably need to be running a decent number of agendas to be able to justify this. I think maybe it's a little bit too counterplayable. Like a runner that really knows what they're doing will be able to figure out a way to diffuse this kind of situation, I think. But maybe not. Maybe it's just strong. Maybe it reminds me a bit of Perfect Recall from HB, but a bit less of like a puzzle box that you can figure out what to do with, and a bit more of just like a crushing, oh, you can't interact with the game anymore because I'm going to Red RRoom you. So I don't really know how good it is, to be honest with you. It's pretty tough for me to evaluate, but I think it is such a strong effect, that end the run counter, and I don't think it's impossible to get a couple of them and kind of chain them together in a way. So I'm going to give this one 4 stars. I don't know who's going to run it, but someone's going to run it, and it's going to be really good. And that's it for Jinteki. They're definitely pushing a slower version of Jinteki in this set than last set, which was extremely fast with Alco and scoring and killing. The standout card here is definitely the ID Melies U, which is going to make every other card so much better than it looks like. I would happily be wrong about Lotus Haze. Maybe moving around your Red RRoom is that good. I could be happily wrong about Red RRoom as well. That could really be something. The rest of these, the one that I struggled most to evaluate for some reason is Cultivate. I just don't know how strong that effect really is. Like, am I really willing to put this in my deck just for consistency's sake? Maybe I am. But please have fun. Play a slower version of Jinteki. Get the feel of Jinteki Glacier. It can be a strong effect, and it's really fun to play, and sometimes pretty brutal to play against. Melies U, what a card. I'm not looking forward to clean getawaying archives, hitting an Esker, they take back a hedge fund, and it's like, oh, what have I done? But yeah, have fun, and I'll see you in the next one.